The dinner crowd fell silent when the restaurant manager ripped the plate from the old man's hands. "You think this is a charity?" he shouted. The elderly man sat near the back entrance, wearing a torn brown coat and shoes held together with tape. He had eaten only 2 bites of the warm meal before the manager, Richard Cole, stormed across the dining room. Standing beside them was 24-year-old waitress Emily Carter. Her hands trembled, but she refused to look away. "I paid for the meal," she said. Richard stared at her. "With what money?" "My tips." "That isn't the point. It was food that would have been thrown away tonight." Richard placed the plate on a nearby table. "The people dining here pay hundreds of dollars for an experience. They don't want to see homeless men sitting beside them." The old man slowly lowered his eyes. Emily felt her chest tighten. He had entered through the back door 10 minutes earlier and quietly asked whether the kitchen had any leftover bread. He hadn't demanded anything. He hadn't bothered anyone. He had simply said he hadn't eaten in 2 days. Emily remembered what hunger looked like. After her father died, her mother worked 2 jobs to keep them from losing their apartment. Some nights, dinner had been a single can of soup divided between 3 people. Emily never forgot the people who helped them. Now she looked at Richard. "He's a human being." Richard laughed coldly. "He's a problem." Several customers watched from their tables. Some looked uncomfortable, while others raised their phones to record. Richard pointed toward the employee entrance. "Get him out." Emily stepped between him and the old man. "No." Richard's expression changed. "What did you say?" "I said no." The old man gently touched Emily's arm. "It's all right, miss." "No, it isn't." He gave her a tired smile. "You've already done more than enough." Richard turned toward 2 kitchen employees. "Remove him." Emily picked up the plate and handed it back to the old man. "He hasn't finished." Richard slapped the plate from her hands. It crashed onto the floor. Food scattered across the polished tiles. The old man flinched. Emily stared at the broken plate. Then she slowly looked up. "You didn't have to do that." Richard lowered his voice. "Take off your apron." The entire room became quiet. Emily blinked. "What?" "You're fired." One of the cooks stepped forward. "Richard, come on. Stay out of it. Stay out of it." Emily had worked at Bellamy's restaurant for almost 4 years. She had never missed a shift. She covered for sick employees, worked holidays, and stayed late whenever the restaurant was short-staffed. She needed the job. Her mother's medical bills were piling up, and her younger brother had just started college. Losing her income could destroy everything. Richard knew that. He smiled. "Maybe your next employer will appreciate your charity work." Emily slowly untied her apron. Her eyes filled with tears, but she refused to cry in front of him. She placed the apron on the counter. Then she helped the old man stand. "Come with me." Richard shook his head. "You're making a mistake." Emily looked back. Emily looked back. "No, you are." Outside, cold rain covered the city streets. Emily opened her umbrella and walked with the old man toward a bus shelter. "I'm sorry," he said. "This is my fault." "No. You lost your job because of me. I lost my job because my manager forgot what kind of person he was supposed to be." The old man studied her face. "What's your name?" "Emily." He nodded. He nodded. "My name is Samuel." They reached the shelter. Emily removed the sandwich she had packed for her break and gave it to him. Samuel hesitated. "What will you eat?" "I'll be all right." "You shouldn't lie to old people. We've had years of practice recognizing it." Emily smiled for the first time. Samuel broke the sandwich in half. "Then we share. Then we share." They sat together while the rain struck the shelter roof. Samuel ate slowly. After a while he asked, "Why did you help me?" Emily looked toward the restaurant. "When I was 12, my mother and I were living in our car." Samuel said nothing. "One night we went into a small diner just to get warm. We only had enough money for 1 cup of coffee." She smiled at the memory. "The waitress brought us soup, bread, and 2 slices of pie. She told us someone had paid for it, but there was no one else inside." "She paid?" Emily nodded. "She never made us feel ashamed. She treated us like we mattered." Samuel looked down at the sandwich. "And now you do the same for strangers." "I try." A bus approached in the distance. Samuel reached inside his coat and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. He wrote something with a short pencil. Then he handed the note to Emily. "What is this?" "Something I should have written a long time ago." Before Emily could read it, the bus arrived. Samuel stood. "Keep your kindness, Emily. The world will try to convince you it's a weakness." He stepped onto the bus and disappeared into the night. Emily opened the note. It contained only 1 sentence. "Please forgive me for taking so long to come home." Below it was a name. Samuel Bellamy. Emily stared at the signature. Bellamy. The same name displayed above the restaurant entrance. She turned toward the building. Before she could process what it meant, her phone rang. It was the hospital. Her mother had suffered another medical emergency. Emily forgot about the note and ran. For the next 2 days, she remained beside her mother's hospital bed. Doctors said the treatment was working, but the bills would be enormous. Emily applied for jobs from a plastic chair in the hallway. Every restaurant she contacted asked why she had left Bellamy's. When she told the truth, the interviews ended quickly. Richard had already called several restaurant owners and labeled her difficult. By Friday morning, Emily had only $43 left in her account. Across the city, Richard was preparing Bellamy's for an important private event. The restaurant's owner, 78-year-old Charles Bellamy, was returning after 12 years abroad. Charles had founded Bellamy's decades earlier with his younger brother Samuel. Together, they turned a small neighborhood cafe into one of the city's most respected restaurants. But after their father died, the brothers fought over the business. Charles wanted luxury, expansion, and wealthy clients. Samuel wanted affordable meals and a community kitchen for struggling families. Their argument became so bitter that Samuel sold his share and disappeared. Charles never heard from him again. Over the years, Charles built an empire. Yet every success reminded him of the brother he had lost. That evening, he entered Bellamy's through the front doors. Richard greeted him with applause, expensive champagne, and a carefully rehearsed speech. "Mr. Bellamy, it is an honor to welcome you home." Charles looked around. The restaurant was beautiful. Perfect table settings. Imported flowers. Soft piano music. But something felt missing. "Where is the old community board?" he asked. Richard hesitated. "What board?" "The one where people could leave requests for free meals." Richard forced a smile. "We removed it. It didn't match the restaurant's image." Charles frowned. "And the Sunday kitchen?" "We ended that program." "Why?" "It attracted the wrong kind of people." Charles stared at him. "What kind of people?" Richard laughed nervously. "You know, people who couldn't afford to dine here." Charles's expression hardened. Before he could answer, one of the cooks approached. "Mr. Bellamy, there's something you should know." Richard stepped between them. "This isn't the time." The cook continued. 2 nights ago, Richard fired our best waitress." Charles looked at him, and he was hired by the respective friends. "For what reason?" "She bought a meal for an elderly homeless man." Richard quickly defended himself. The man was disturbing customers. He was sitting quietly, the cook said. Richard knocked the food from his hands. Charles's face became pale. "What did the man look like?" The cook described Samuel's torn coat, silver beard, and deep scar above his left eyebrow. Charles gripped the edge of a table. His younger brother had received that scar when they were children after pulling Charles away from a moving truck. "Did he give anyone his name?" The cook shook his head. Richard shrugged. "He was just some homeless old man." Charles turned toward him. "No human being is just anything." The front door opened. A police officer entered, holding a weathered envelope. "Is Charles Bellamy here?" Charles stepped forward. The officer handed it to him. "This was found in the coat of a man who collapsed near Central Station last night." Charles struggled to breathe. "Is he alive?" "He's at St. Matthew's Hospital." Charles opened the envelope. Inside was a photograph of 2 young brothers standing in front of the original Bellamy's cafe. There was also a copy of the note Samuel had given Emily. On the back, Samuel had written, "I came home because I wanted to see whether the restaurant still fed hungry people. A young waitress gave me her own meal and lost her job for it. She reminded me of what we once promised this place would become. Find Emily Carter. She understands Bellamy's better than either of us ever did." Charles looked at Richard. "Where is she?" "I don't know." Find out." Within an hour, Charles learned Emily was at the same hospital as Samuel. He arrived to find her asleep beside her mother's bed. A nurse gently woke her. Emily opened her eyes and saw an elderly man in an expensive suit standing in the doorway. "Emily Carter?" "Yes." "My name is Charles Bellamy." She immediately reached into her bag and handed him Samuel's note. "Is he your brother?" Charles nodded. Tears filled his eyes. "He is." "Is he all right?" "He's weak, but the doctors believe he'll recover." Emily sighed with relief. Charles looked at her mother. "I heard what happened at the restaurant. I didn't mean to cause trouble." "You didn't cause it, you revealed it." He sat beside her. "My brother and I created Bellamy's because our mother once went hungry to feed us. We promised no one would ever be turned away from our restaurant because they had no money." Charles lowered his eyes. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that promise. Emily said nothing. I cannot change what happened to my brother, but I can decide what happens next. The following evening, Charles gathered every employee inside Bellamy's. Richard stood near the front, confident that the controversy would disappear. Instead, Charles placed Samuel's note on the table. This restaurant was founded to serve people, not judge them. He turned toward Richard. You removed our free meal program, mistreated employees, and humiliated my brother. Richard's face turned white. I didn't know who he was. Charles shook his head. That is exactly the problem. You believe kindness should depend on knowing someone's importance. He removed Richard's management badge. You are no longer employed here. Then Charles faced the staff. Bellamy's will reopen next month with a new purpose. The restaurant began offering free dinners every Sunday. A community refrigerator was installed near the entrance. Customers could purchase meals for strangers who needed them. Charles also paid Emily's mother's medical bills and created a college fund for her brother. But his biggest decision surprised everyone. He asked Emily to return, not as a waitress, but as director of the new Bellamy Community Kitchen. At first, she refused. I don't have management experience. Charles smiled. You have something harder to teach. What? Carrot. Weeks later, Samuel entered the restaurant again. This time, he wore a clean suit, but Emily recognized him immediately. She ran across the room and hugged him. The brothers stood face to face after 12 years of silence. Charles lowered his head. I'm sorry. Samuel looked around at the crowded community kitchen. Families ate warm meals. Volunteers packed food for shelters. A wooden sign hung above the entrance. No one leaves hungry. Samuel smiled. This is the apology. The brothers embraced. From that day forward, Bellamy's became famous for something greater than expensive food. It became known as the restaurant, where dignity was always free. And every evening, Emily kept Samuel's note framed beside her desk. Not because it had changed her life, but because it reminded her that one act of kindness can travel farther than we will ever see. People may forget what you served them. They may forget what you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel when they had nothing to offer you in return.